The starship's engines hummed with a soft, rhythmic vibration as it drifted through the velvet expanse of space. Lieutenant Marcus Kane stood at the observation deck, his fingers grazing the cool glass of the viewport. The vastness of the cosmos stretched before him, an endless tapestry of stars and swirling nebulae that never failed to stir something deep within his chest. He'd been part of the United Earth Expeditionary Force for nearly a decade, but nothing could have prepared him for this moment. 3 days ago, their ship had picked up an unusual signal emanating from a remote sector of the Andromeda Galaxy. It wasn't like any known communication protocol, more organic than mechanical, pulsing with patterns that seemed almost alive. The signal led them to a planet shrouded in perpetual twilight, its atmosphere glowing with ethereal hues of violet and gold. Against all protocols, Marcus had volunteered to lead the away team when sensors detected signs of intelligent life. As they descended through the planet's atmosphere, the landscape revealed itself in breathtaking detail. Towering crystalline structures reached skyward, refracting light into cascading rainbows that danced across the surface. Strange, bioluminescent flora carpeted the ground, their gentle glow creating pools of color that shifted with each passing moment. The air carried a faint, sweet scent that reminded Marcus of spring blossoms back on Earth, though he couldn't identify the source. His boots crunched against the crystalline ground as he took his first steps on this alien world. The rest of his team spread out, scanning the area with their equipment while maintaining constant communication. Everything about this place felt different, not just visually, but in a way that resonated with his very being. The air seemed charged with energy, and an inexplicable warmth spread through his body despite the planet's moderate temperature. Marcus's eyes caught movement in the distance, subtle shifts in the light patterns of the crystal forest. At first, he thought it might be refractions or atmospheric distortions, but there was intention behind these movements. His heart quickened as he realized they were being watched. Through his comm unit, he heard the voice of Commander Lee. "Lieutenant, do you see what I'm seeing?" Before he could respond, the ground beneath their feet began to shimmer, and the air thickened with an otherworldly presence. The crystals around them pulsed in unison, casting their surroundings in a cascade of liquid light. From the heart of this luminous display emerged a figure that would forever change their understanding of consciousness itself. She appeared as if woven from the very essence of the planet, her form both solid and ephemeral, shifting between states of matter with effortless grace. Her skin radiated with an inner luminescence that made Earth's most precious gems seem dull in comparison. Standing nearly 7 feet tall, her presence dominated the space without any sense of threat or aggression. Her eyes, large and multifaceted like the finest cut diamonds, held galaxies within their depths, each facet containing infinite stories waiting to be told. Her hair flowed upward rather than down, defying gravity in delicate strands that shimmered through every spectrum of visible light. It moved with a life of its own, responding to unseen currents and emotions that rippled through her being. Her garments weren't fabric in the traditional sense, but rather living patterns of light that swirled and rearranged themselves across her form, creating designs more intricate than any human artist could conceive. What struck Marcus most profoundly was how she seemed to exist simultaneously in multiple dimensions. Parts of her form occasionally phased out of visible reality, only to return moments later with slight variations, as if she were sampling different versions of herself across parallel possibilities. Her movements possessed an elegance that transcended mere physicality. They spoke of an intelligence so advanced that it manifested in every gesture and glance. The air around her vibrated with harmonics that resonated directly with Marcus's soul. These weren't sounds in the conventional sense, but rather feelings transformed into audible frequencies. Each note carried layers of meaning far beyond language, communicating concepts that his mind struggled to comprehend yet his spirit instinctively understood. The space between them seemed to fold and expand simultaneously, creating an intimate connection that defied the physical distance separating them. When she finally spoke, her voice emerged as a symphony of tones that bypassed Marcus's ears entirely, resonating directly within his consciousness. The words formed themselves in his mind, perfectly translated yet carrying nuances no human language could adequately express. "You are welcome here, human," she said, and Marcus felt the weight of billions of years of evolution and civilization compressed into those simple words. The Queen's gaze locked onto Marcus, and something extraordinary happened. Something that defied all logic and expectation. Her radiant complexion, which had maintained an aura of regal composure, suddenly flushed with colors that danced across her features like the northern lights. The prismatic hues of her skin intensified, pulsing with an unmistakable pattern of embarrassment and wonder. "Your presence," she began, her melodic voice trembling slightly. "It creates unexpected reactions." She raised one elegant hand to her face, as if trying to shield herself from her own response. The gesture seemed both impossibly graceful and endearingly human. Her crystalline hair flickered with increased intensity, sending off sparks of colored light that illuminated the surrounding area. Marcus felt rooted to the spot, unable to process what he was witnessing. The most powerful being he had ever encountered, ruler of an advanced civilization spanning countless worlds, was visibly flustered by his mere existence. The Queen's normally fluid movements became momentarily hesitant, her usually composed demeanor crackling with an electric vulnerability that made her seem more approachable, more real than any other moment since their arrival. "I have encountered many species," she continued, her voice wrapping around Marcus like a warm embrace, "but none that caused such biological responses." The admission seemed to cost her, yet she pressed on, her multifaceted eyes never leaving his. "Your kind possesses qualities we had not anticipated. Qualities that resonate with aspects of our own nature we believed long dormant." The Queen's blush deepened, spreading along her neck and shoulders in waves of iridescent color. Small fragments of her form began to phase in and out more frequently, as if her usual control over her dimensional presence was slipping. Marcus noticed that the air around her grew warmer, carrying with it a scent reminiscent of blooming flowers and fresh rain, though neither existed naturally on this alien world. "It is disconcerting," she confessed, her voice carrying a mixture of frustration and fascination. "For centuries untold, we have maintained perfect emotional equilibrium. Yet now—" She paused, taking a step closer to Marcus, her movements becoming more deliberate. "Now I find myself experiencing sensations that challenge everything I know about diplomatic encounters." The crystalline structures around them responded to her emotional state, their light patterns shifting in sync with her changing colors. The entire environment seemed to pulse with the rhythm of her heartbeat, creating a shared space where human and alien consciousness intertwined in ways neither could have predicted. Marcus felt a strange kinship with this magnificent being, recognizing in her reaction something fundamentally universal: the power of genuine connection to transcend even the greatest barriers between species. As the Queen's confession hung in the air, Marcus found himself struggling to maintain his professional composure. The sheer improbability of the situation, a human causing such a profound reaction in an advanced alien sovereign, threatened to overwhelm his rational mind. Yet beneath the shock lay something deeper, a stirring recognition that perhaps this encounter was more significant than either of them had initially understood. "I must confess," Marcus began, his voice steadier than he expected, "that your reaction is unprecedented in my experience as well." He took a cautious step forward, noting how the Queen's luminous form seemed to brighten in response. "On Earth, we have legends of beings who could inspire such profound effects simply through their presence. To witness it firsthand, especially from someone of your stature." The Queen's eyes widened slightly, catching Marcus off guard with their sudden intensity. "You misunderstand," she interjected, her voice carrying a newfound urgency. "This is not merely about physical presence or aesthetics. Your kind carries within it echoes of primordial forces we believed extinct, forces that shaped the earliest civilizations of my people." She extended one hand toward him, palm up, and Marcus felt an invisible current pass between them, tingling against his skin like static electricity. "What you perceive as attraction is actually resonance," she explained, her words flowing faster now, as if the explanation itself helped her regain some measure of control. "Your genetic makeup contains patterns that align with ancient evolutionary paths we share. Paths we abandoned millennia ago in pursuit of pure intellect and technological advancement." Her gaze softened, and Marcus noticed her blush fading slightly, replaced by an expression of profound realization. "In your presence, I am reminded of what we sacrificed in our pursuit of progress," she continued, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "Emotional depth, physical connection, the raw, unfiltered experience of being truly alive." She turned away for a moment, her crystalline hair sweeping in a graceful arc as she gazed toward the horizon. "My people have achieved much, but we have also lost much. Seeing you reminds me of what once was, and perhaps what could be again." Marcus felt a wave of understanding wash over him, accompanied by a growing sense of responsibility. This wasn't just about two individuals meeting across the void of space. It represented a potential bridge between species, a chance to rediscover forgotten aspects of consciousness that both their peoples had evolved away from. The Queen's vulnerability wasn't weakness. It was an opening, a crack in the carefully constructed facade of advanced civilization through which something new and vital might emerge. The revelation hung heavy in the air between them, transforming the initial shock of their encounter into something far more profound. Marcus could feel the weight of history pressing upon him, not just human history but the collective journey of two species whose paths had diverged eons ago, only to converge again in this moment of cosmic significance. The Queen's earlier embarrassment had given way to a determined focus, her movements now purposeful as she gestured toward the crystalline cityscape stretching beyond the clearing. "Come," she said, her voice carrying both command and invitation. "There is much you need to understand about why your presence affects me so profoundly." As Marcus followed her lead, he noticed how the environment seemed to respond to their combined presence. The crystal structures humming with renewed energy, their light patterns weaving together in complex harmonics that created a visual symphony around them. "This world you see before you," she explained as they walked, "exists in a state of quantum flux, constantly oscillating between physical and energetic states. My people learned to master this balance, to exist comfortably in both realms simultaneously." She paused, turning to face Marcus with an expression that combined scientific curiosity with personal revelation. "But your presence disrupts this equilibrium in fascinating ways. The very fabric of our reality responds to your genetic signature as if recognizing something fundamental about its own origins." As they approached a particularly massive crystalline structure, Marcus noticed how the Queen's form seemed to shift more noticeably now, phasing between states with greater frequency. "Our ancestors," she continued, "were not always so refined. Before we achieved our current level of development, we too experienced emotions with the same raw intensity you humans take for granted. We too knew passion, uncertainty, and the thrill of discovery in its purest form." She placed her hand against the crystal wall, causing it to ripple outward in concentric waves of light. "These structures contain the memories of those times, the last remnants of our emotional heritage." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine as he realized the implications. "You're saying that humanity somehow retains aspects of your original nature?" The Queen nodded, her multifaceted eyes reflecting the truth of his words. "Not just aspects," she corrected, "but essential components of what we once were. Your DNA carries markers that resonate with our most ancient evolutionary paths we abandoned in our quest for intellectual supremacy." The revelation struck Marcus with overwhelming force. They weren't just dealing with a cultural misunderstanding or interspecies attraction. This was evidence of a shared origin story written in the very code of their beings. The Queen's reaction to him wasn't merely personal. It represented a fundamental awakening within her entire species, a reconnection with their primal roots through the unexpected medium of human contact. As they entered the crystalline structure, Marcus noticed how the interior walls displayed shifting patterns that seemed to respond to their conversation. "We believed these traits were lost forever," the Queen admitted, her voice carrying both wonder and regret. "That we had evolved beyond such primitive responses. But your presence proves otherwise, shows us that perhaps evolution isn't always linear, that sometimes progress means rediscovering what was left behind." The Queen led Marcus deeper into the crystalline structure, each step revealing more about the complex relationship between their species. As they passed through chambers filled with floating holographic displays, Marcus noticed how the information presented itself in patterns that seemed to anticipate his questions before he voiced them. "Your people's technology," he observed, "seems to operate on principles similar to intuition rather than pure logic." "An astute observation," the Queen responded, her earlier embarrassment giving way to genuine enthusiasm. "Our advancements have always been guided by what you might call felt knowledge. Understanding that comes from direct experience rather than purely intellectual analysis." She paused before a particularly intricate display showing the molecular structure of both human and alien DNA. "Notice how certain sequences align perfectly, while others create harmonic vibrations when brought close together." Marcus leaned closer, watching as the strands of genetic material danced in response to the Queen's touch. "It's like they're singing to each other," he murmured, surprised by the accuracy of his own description. The Queen's eyes sparkled with approval. "Precisely. Your species maintains this natural resonance, whereas we have developed technologies to artificially maintain it. Your presence awakens memories of when such connections came naturally to us. They moved through a chamber filled with what appeared to be historical records, crystalline formations that pulsed with light in complex patterns. The Queen touched one, and images sprang to life showing her people in their early evolutionary stages. "Look closely," she instructed. "Do you notice the similarities in social structures? The way communities formed around shared emotional experiences." Marcus watched as scenes of ancient alien gatherings unfolded, remarkably similar to human tribal rituals. "These revelations are challenging everything we thought we knew about our evolutionary path," the Queen admitted, her voice carrying both excitement and trepidation. "Your presence suggests that perhaps our separation from our emotional heritage wasn't entirely voluntary." She led him to another display showing star charts and migration patterns. "During a great cosmic event millions of years ago, our ancestors encountered a force that accelerated our intellectual evolution dramatically. We've always assumed this was beneficial, but now I wonder if we didn't lose something equally valuable in the process." Marcus felt a growing sense of responsibility as he absorbed this information. If our species share this common heritage, then perhaps we can help each other rediscover what was lost. The Queen's form shimmered with approval. "That is precisely why your presence is so profoundly affecting. You represent not just a diplomatic opportunity, but a chance for mutual growth and understanding." She paused, her next words carrying particular weight. "Many among my people will resist this idea, fearing regression or loss of identity. Yet I believe embracing our shared origins could lead to an evolution far more profound than either of our species has experienced alone." The Queen's revelation about their shared evolutionary heritage sent ripples through the core of Marcus's understanding. As they continued their exploration of the crystalline archives, he found himself grappling with implications that transcended mere scientific curiosity. The Queen's earlier embarrassment, her visceral reaction to his presence. These weren't isolated incidents but manifestations of a deeper truth about the interconnectedness of consciousness itself. "We've always believed evolution was a linear progression," the Queen elaborated as they paused before a massive holographic display showing the branching pathways of both species' development. "But your presence challenges that assumption. Perhaps what appears to be advancement is sometimes merely adaptation, a narrowing of possibilities rather than an expansion." She touched the display, and the branches merged at several points, creating brilliant bursts of light where their evolutionary paths intersected. Marcus watched as the display shifted to show neural activity patterns, both human and alien. "Your brain chemistry," the Queen explained, "maintains a balance we sacrificed in our pursuit of intellectual dominance. The way your emotions influence cognition, the role of instinct in decision-making, these are not primitive vestiges but essential components of consciousness we suppressed." She turned to him with an expression that blended scientific fascination with personal longing. "When I look at you, I see not just another species, but a reflection of what we once were, and perhaps, what we could become again." The realization hit Marcus with the force of revelation. Their encounter wasn't merely a diplomatic incident or an interesting scientific anomaly. It represented a fundamental choice point for both species. The Queen's reaction to him symbolized more than personal attraction. It embodied the struggle between maintaining the status quo and embracing transformation. Her people faced a crisis of identity, forced to confront whether their supposed advancement had actually limited their potential for growth. Theories of consciousness often suggest that true awareness requires the integration of all aspects of being, the Queen continued, her voice carrying the weight of generations of accumulated wisdom. "We focused solely on intellect, believing emotion to be a distraction. But your presence demonstrates that feeling is not oppositional to thinking. It's complementary. That blush you witnessed was not weakness but evidence of a system attempting to reintegrate parts of itself long considered obsolete." As Marcus processed these insights, he noticed how the crystalline structures around them responded, their light patterns shifting in ways that mirrored the complexity of their discussion. The Queen's form seemed to grow more substantial, less prone to phasing between dimensions, suggesting that their conversation was anchoring her in this reality. "Perhaps," she mused, "the reason your presence affects me so profoundly is that you represent the possibility of wholeness, the integration of paths we separated long ago." The Queen's revelation about their shared evolutionary heritage opened doors to discussions that blurred the lines between science, philosophy, and spirituality. As they moved through the crystalline archives, Marcus noticed how the Queen's demeanor shifted subtly, her earlier vulnerability transforming into a quiet determination. Our species' divergence was not merely biological, she explained, touching a crystalline panel that illuminated with constellations unknown to human astronomers. It represents a fundamental choice about the nature of consciousness itself. You mentioned earlier that your people abandoned certain evolutionary paths, Marcus prompted, watching how the Queen's touch caused the star patterns to shift and realign. Could you elaborate on what exactly was sacrificed? The Queen turned to him, her multifaceted eyes reflecting galaxies of thought. Imagine possessing senses so acute that individual atoms appeared as distinct entities, or comprehending mathematical relationships so complex they bordered on metaphysical insight. These abilities came at a cost. The gradual attenuation of what you humans call intuition, the gut feeling that guides action without conscious reasoning. The Queen led him to a chamber where the crystalline walls displayed cascading patterns of light that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. We developed technologies to enhance our remaining capabilities, but these tools gradually replaced natural functions. Your species, however, retained the full spectrum of sensory input, including those we dismissed as inefficient. She demonstrated by activating a display showing how human neural networks processed information simultaneously through multiple channels: logical, emotional, instinctual, creating a rich tapestry of understanding. What fascinates me most, she continued, her voice carrying both admiration and longing, is how your consciousness seems capable of existing comfortably in paradox. You can be aware of quantum mechanics while still experiencing the solidity of everyday objects. You can appreciate the vastness of the universe while finding meaning in individual moments. The Queen's form shimmered slightly, as if her very essence resonated with this concept. To us, these states were mutually exclusive. We chose one path and closed ourselves off from the other. Marcus felt the weight of understanding settling upon him. So my presence here represents not just a reminder of your past, but a potential future direction? The Queen nodded, her crystalline hair sparking with agreement. Exactly. Your species demonstrates that evolution doesn't have to mean specialization to the exclusion of other traits. The capacity for both profound intellectual achievement and deep emotional connection. These are not opposing forces but complementary aspects of consciousness. The Queen activated another display showing how human culture had developed technologies that enhanced rather than replaced natural functions. Telescopes extending vision rather than replacing it, musical instruments amplifying vocal expression rather than supplanting it. Your approach to progress preserves the essence of experience while expanding its reach. We, in our pursuit of efficiency, often eliminated the very processes we sought to enhance. Her voice carried a note of revelation. Perhaps that's why your presence creates such resonance. It represents a synthesis of possibilities we believed irreconcilable. As they continued their exploration, Marcus noticed how the Queen's interactions with her environment changed subtly. Where before she had manipulated the crystalline technology with precise, calculated gestures, now her movements carried a fluidity that mirrored human expressiveness. The environmental responses became more intuitive, less rigidly structured. It was as if their discussion was catalyzing changes not just in their understanding but in the very fabric of their shared reality. The Queen paused before a massive crystalline formation that seemed to contain shifting patterns of light representing both species' consciousness. The true significance of your presence, she said, her voice carrying the weight of cosmic importance, is that it offers proof that evolution need not be a zero-sum game. That retaining access to multiple states of being, physical and non-physical, emotional and intellectual, creates possibilities far greater than choosing one path exclusively. She turned to Marcus with an expression that combined scientific curiosity with something approaching spiritual awe. In you, I see not just a representative of your species, but a living demonstration of what consciousness might become when allowed to evolve holistically rather than specialized. Their exploration led them to a central chamber where the crystalline architecture seemed alive with anticipation. The Queen's earlier bashfulness had transformed into a focused determination, her movements now carrying the weight of generational wisdom. Throughout our history, she began, her voice resonating through the chamber like a symphony of understanding, we've interpreted our evolutionary choices as necessary progress. But your presence challenges that narrative, suggesting that what we considered advancement was actually a form of limitation. Marcus watched as the Queen activated a holographic interface, displaying timelines that showed both species' development. Notice how your technological progress follows a different trajectory, she pointed out, tracing patterns in the air that caused the display to shift and expand. Where we sought to replace natural functions with artificial enhancements, your species has developed technologies that complement and extend existing capabilities. She highlighted examples: prosthetics that restore rather than replace limbs, virtual reality that enhances rather than substitutes for physical experience, artificial intelligence designed to augment rather than supersede human cognition. The Queen turned to face Marcus, her multifaceted eyes reflecting the depth of her realization. Your approach to technology mirrors your approach to consciousness itself: integration rather than replacement, enhancement rather than elimination. This suggests that perhaps our species' divergence wasn't predetermined, but rather a choice influenced by circumstances we no longer fully understand. She gestured toward a display showing how human languages evolved to encompass both precise technical terminology and poetic metaphor, while her own species' communication had increasingly relied on purely logical constructs. Consider how your arts and sciences coexist, she continued, activating another display that showed human achievements in both fields. Music that expresses mathematical relationships, poetry that captures quantum physics, visual art that represents multidimensional spaces. In your species, these domains remain interconnected, while we pursued a path of increasing specialization that ultimately led to fragmentation. The Queen's form shimmered with realization. Your presence here represents more than just a diplomatic encounter or an evolutionary curiosity. It embodies the possibility of reunification. As Marcus absorbed these insights, he noticed how the crystalline structures around them responded, their light patterns shifting to reflect the integration of concepts. The Queen's earlier phasing between dimensions had become more controlled, suggesting that their discussion was helping her anchor in a unified state of being. Perhaps, she mused, touching a final display that showed both species' neural activity patterns merging into a new configuration, the true significance of our shared heritage lies not in returning to the past, but in forging a new path forward. One that combines the best aspects of both evolutionary trajectories, your holistic integration of consciousness and our technological sophistication. The Queen's voice carried a mixture of excitement and trepidation as she continued. Imagine a future where neither species sacrifices essential aspects of being for the sake of progress. Where technology serves to enhance rather than replace natural functions, and consciousness evolves through integration rather than specialization. She stepped closer to Marcus, her crystalline form vibrating with barely contained energy. Your presence here is more than just a reminder of what we once were. It's a catalyst for what we both could become. As they stood in the heart of the crystalline chamber, surrounded by displays chronicling both species' journeys, Marcus felt the weight of cosmic significance pressing upon him. The Queen's earlier embarrassment had transformed into a profound understanding of their shared destiny. "The choice before us," she said, her voice resonating with the authority of centuries of leadership, "is not merely academic or philosophical. It represents a fundamental decision about the nature of consciousness itself, whether to continue along separate paths of specialization or to embrace a new paradigm of integrated evolution." The Queen activated a final display, showing how human and alien DNA sequences could potentially merge and diverge in patterns that suggested infinite possibilities. "Each strand represents not just genetic material but modes of being," she explained, her fingers tracing the luminous patterns. "Your species maintains connections between physical, emotional, and intellectual aspects of consciousness that we severed long ago. Yet we have developed technologies that allow us to manipulate reality in ways you cannot yet imagine." Her gaze met Marcus's with unwavering intensity. "Together, we represent the complete spectrum of consciousness, from the most fundamental biological impulses to the highest reaches of technological sophistication." Marcus felt a surge of understanding as he watched the DNA sequences dance and intertwine. "You're suggesting that our encounter isn't just about rediscovering lost aspects of consciousness, but about creating something entirely new?" The Queen nodded, her crystalline form glowing with the intensity of revelation. "Precisely. The future isn't about choosing between paths already traveled, but forging a new route that honors both our histories while transcending their limitations." She paused, gathering her thoughts before continuing. "Our species' divergence created two complementary approaches to existence, yours emphasizing holistic integration, mine focusing on specialized advancement. But these aren't opposing philosophies, they're two halves of a greater whole." The Queen gestured toward the display, which now showed potential futures branching from their current convergence. "By combining our strengths, We could develop technologies that enhance rather than replace natural functions, create art that expresses both emotional depth and mathematical precision, build societies that value both intuition and analysis equally. The implications of this vision began to unfold before Marcus's eyes. Such integration would require both species to confront fundamental questions about identity and purpose, he observed, watching as the Queen's form stabilized in a state that combined her earlier fluidity with newfound substance. Exactly, she agreed. Your presence here represents not just an opportunity for reunion but for transcendence. A chance to move beyond the limitations of our respective evolutionary paths and create something entirely new. A consciousness that encompasses all aspects of being without sacrificing any. The Queen's voice carried both hope and warning as she concluded. The path forward won't be easy. Many among my people will resist this integration, fearing loss of identity or regression. Likewise, your species must grapple with the implications of embracing aspects of consciousness you've never experienced. She placed her hand against the central crystal, causing the entire chamber to resonate with harmonious frequencies. But the alternative, continuing along separate paths that grow increasingly specialized and isolated, would mean denying the full potential of consciousness itself. As Marcus absorbed these revelations, he noticed how the crystalline structures around them had begun to transform, their light patterns shifting to reflect the emerging possibilities. The Queen's form had achieved a new stability, existing simultaneously in multiple states without conflict or hesitation. Your presence here, she said, her voice carrying the weight of cosmic significance, represents the beginning of a transformation that could redefine what it means to be conscious, not just for our species, but for all forms of life throughout the universe. The Queen's words hung in the air, vibrating with possibility. Marcus felt the enormity of the moment pressing on him, a shared destiny unfolding between them. If we choose this path, he said softly, it won't just change us, it will ripple across the stars. Her luminous form shimmered, and for the first time, her blush returned, not out of embarrassment but awe. Yes, she whispered, her voice a melody that resonated through his very soul. And it begins now, with you and me. Around them, the crystalline chamber pulsed brighter, as if the planet itself responded to their unspoken agreement. The Queen extended her hand, not commanding but inviting. Marcus hesitated only briefly before stepping forward, his human warmth meeting her radiant glow. In that instant, something shifted, a spark ignited, bridging two worlds. You have no idea what you've awakened in me, she admitted, her multifaceted eyes reflecting galaxies of emotion. But I trust it. I trust you. The air grew thick with anticipation, charged with the promise of transformation neither could fully comprehend. Yet they stood there, united by curiosity, vulnerability, and hope. As the chamber's light enveloped them both, Marcus realized this wasn't an ending, it was a beginning. A fragile, beautiful thread connecting two species, two consciousnesses, two hearts. The Queen smiled, her blush deepening once more. Shall we take the first step together? She asked, her voice trembling with equal parts fear and excitement. Marcus nodded, feeling the weight of billions of lives resting on their decision. Together, they turned toward the glowing horizon, where new possibilities awaited. Behind them, the crystalline city hummed louder, its structures shifting and realigning as though celebrating the union. The Queen's presence seemed steadier now, anchored by his resolve. We don't know what lies ahead, Marcus said, his voice steady despite the uncertainty. But whatever happens, we face it together. Her laughter echoed like chimes in the wind, carrying relief and joy. Together, she agreed, her fingers brushing against his palm, an act so simple yet profound. In that fleeting touch, Marcus felt the barriers between their species dissolve, replaced by a bond deeper than language or logic. It was raw, primal, and achingly real. The Queen's earlier hesitation had vanished, replaced by a quiet confidence born of mutual understanding. She looked at him not as a foreigner but as a partner. You've changed everything, she murmured, her gaze softening. Not because of who you are, but because of who we can become, together. Marcus swallowed hard, overwhelmed by the responsibility, and the privilege of standing at this crossroads. He knew their journey would be fraught with challenges. But as they stepped into the unknown, side by side, he also knew one thing for certain. Their encounter wasn't just about rediscovery, It was about creation. The Queen glanced at him, her iridescent skin glowing with newfound purpose. "Let's write a new story," she said, her voice brimming with determination. And with that, they walked forward, leaving behind old paradigms and stepping into a future written in starlight.